So I want to start out with this interesting article you wrote about cancel culture. This is a topic I've also heard you talk about on your podcast, and it's something I think about a lot. And I think we have a lot of ways in common about thinking of cancel culture, um, and maybe some interesting differences. So I just want to read this part of your article. You say, "quote You suggest a different way of thinking about the amorphous thing we call cancel culture, and a more useful one. Cancellations, defined here as actually losing your job or livelihood, occur when an employee's speech infraction generates public attention that threatens an employer's profits, influence, or reputation. This isn't an issue of, quote, wokeness, as anyone who has been on the business end of a right wing mob trying to get them or their employees fired, as you have multiple times, knows. It's driven by economics, and the key actors are social media giants and employers who really could change the decisions they make in ways that will lead to a better speech climate for us all." So I found that to be a really interesting nugget. And I think, I totally agree that the issue of cancellation is logically separate from the issue of a particular ideology, right? I would say at the moment, there are more cancellations by woke people than of woke people, but I wonder if you agree with that. But even if you do agree with that, I'd acknowledge that's just a function of this particular moment in history. And as I think you acknowledged in the piece, imagine if the internet existed right after 9/11, which directions the cancellations would be going.
Yeah, social media, but yeah, that's something I say in the piece. That you shouldn't think about this kind of set of consequences for speech infractions as being, I think of it as more technological and economic, not located just in one ideology. Now, it is a case, and we can talk about the reasons why. I agree, basically, there's more cancellations probably coming from the woke side but you're seeing them on both, and the worm can turn. So you want to have a theory of this and like an approach to it that's a little outside like just the literal year 2021, and will be robust to different turns in the intellectual and ideological culture.
Absolutely. I mean, not only can the valence of cancellations turn, it will turn. I mean, it just will turn. I don't know which direction it will turn, but it's not going to remain static forever. And I think this is one of those issues like free speech where anyone who really tries to stick to a principle throughout their lifetime is going to find themselves in the fullness of time on very different sides of the political spectrum, because almost anyone, the vast majority of people, certainly politicians, but even many people that claim to care about an issue like free speech or cancel culture are very likely to only claim that when it benefits them. It's just one of those issues that perennially tends to make people hypocrites. And I remember reading the book "So You've Been Publicly Shamed" by was it Jonah Goldberg? Is that not Jonah
No,
Goldberg?
that's
Sorry,
John Ronson.
John
John Ronson.
John Ronson.
It's a great book.
Yeah, and some of the cases of cancellations by right wing people, which I think are less likely to show up in my Twitter feed because of who I follow, are just galling. You still can't pee on an American flag or burn an American flag and expect to be given the kind of charity that many people on the right would ask for if they make an analogous infraction on some person's value on the left. So
Well, forget peeing on the American flag. Like as Will Wilkinson's case showed, you can't make a joke about the January 6th insurrection, people wanting to hang Mike Pence and get that kind of generosity.
Right.
So like in some ways, like it's more narrow even than that.
Why do you think there are more cancellations right now by sort of wokeness than of wokeness?
Because if you take my model of it, which is it cancellation as a sort of economic phenomenon, right? Somebody losing their job or losing, kind of consistent economic opportunity. What's going to happen there is you need a couple things to converge, and you read this out. So you need a speech infraction, or what is considered to be a speech infraction, whether it's intentional or not. Also, by the way, whether it's current or not, which is important. then you need that speech infraction to get attention, which has a lot to do with like the draws of the kind of social media lottery, right? So it's not like there is some cultural HR department somewhere that has to treat every incoming claim equally. Sometimes people make a mistake or said something 15 years ago that gets brought up, and sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes it doesn't catch fire, and we really don't know why, right? I see all the time somebody becomes a main character of Twitter for the day or for the week for saying something that seems no worse to me than shit people say all the time, but for whatever reason, like the right people retweeted it, the algorithm picked it up. And so then when that happens and there's a tension now, then it becomes a question for the employer, right? And the employer doesn't want problems. The employer's not that loyal to employees. And so the key thing that happens next is it something big enough that like the social media team begins to say to the executives, hey, we got a problem brewing here, like let's get marketing together or whatever it is. And then they make a decision. And the reason I think you're seeing somewhat more, although again, I don't have like a number on this, but I think it's a reasonable supposition. The reason you're seeing somewhat more of this come from, the quote unquote woke, I think just kind of has to do with educational polarization. And so if you think this stuff is happening at a high level of corporate action, and you think that at those levels, you're going to have like a lot more sort of college educated, people coming out of like urban centers, that kind of thing, which is sort of how our economy seems to be going, then you're going to have a set of concerns that line up more with the concerns of those demographics. And you also have just like the cultural trends that we're in, the sort of era of, Black Lives Matter and a lot of demographic change is something my book is about in part, right? We are seeing a shifting in where power resides in society and who has the power to get their political claims heard. And there is an effort to redraw boundaries about what is polite and even acceptable speech, which is something, by the way, that I'm supportive of. And so it's a convergence of all this that will end up getting people in actual occupational trouble. And for right now, the largest areas of convergence, I think, happen when you sort of make a racist comment, right? Corporations are much more comfortable saying they want to be anti-racist than they want to be pro-universal healthcare, or that they have a particular view on foreign policy. Although it's interesting where you can imagine a lot of cancellations happening in the future. So one, I think we're starting to see is China. And this, like, you can argue what its ideological valence is or isn't, but look at what is happening to, athletes or actors who in some way cross China. And then the way that corporate power is brought to bear on them. And like, I think that's another place where, because it is a little bit more ideologically mixed, you can see the dynamic in a pure way. Like John Cena giving that groveling apology in Mandarin. John Cena giving that groveling apology in Mandarin because he said during the promotional tour in Taiwan for Fast and Furious 9 that Taiwan is a country. Like you're beginning to see the way this power is gonna execute in society. And so I think you see it now, but I think it'll potentially change in the future.